Okay, gentlemen, sorry to cut you off, Shaq. Let's go to Commissioner Adam Silver.
If you have a question, raise your hand in the room. If you're on Zoom, use the raised hand function on the Zoom app. We'll start with some opening comments from the Commissioner, then take questions. Adam?
Thank you, Tim. It's great to be here, and it's great to see everyone. It's been quite a while. Let me begin by talking a little bit about this season. Of course, it's been now the longest season in NBA history. It was almost exactly a year ago when training camps opened. And as you all know, a lot has happened, both within the NBA family and of course, in the country. This is a season where we lost my mentor and one of my closest friends, David Stern. Of course, tragically, Kobe Bryant, his daughter, and their friends. And then the pandemic. And so on March 11th, as we all know, we shut down, and then we embarked on a course over the next several months of how it is and if we would be able to restart NBA basketball. And there were three themes we focused on. Number one, of course, was, can we bring the NBA back? Number two was the health and safety of everyone involved. And that meant all the stakeholders in the NBA, players, coaches, media members, of course. Was there a possibility of having fans? All of that was on the table. And then as events unfolded in the country, social justice became one of those themes as well. And so those were the three main factors that were all in consideration when ultimately we decided to play here in Orlando. And that was a decision we made essentially in mid-May. And just given the unpredictability of this virus, as we all now know, at the time we made that decision in mid-May, Florida had one of the lowest case rates in the country. And by the time we arrived here in early July, it had one of the highest case rates in the country. So that was something, of course, we were dealing with as well. Being here has taken extraordinary sacrifices by everyone involved. Of course, there were the 22 teams that started here, but it was really a 30-team endeavor. It was the agreement of those 8 teams that ultimately they would not be joining us in Orlando, which was enormous sacrifice on their part. And as you all know, they are now, in essence, operating in their own mini bubbles for their training camps. There were the sacrifices of the players, the coaches, the staff who are here, those who left their families behind, their friends, who gave up a lot of their liberties, just as many of you have, by living on this campus. There are the 6,500 people in this community in Orlando who've been servicing the people here on this campus. It's an extraordinarily high number, something I think beyond what anyone would realize from the outside. I analogize it a bit to when you go to a movie and you see the actors on the screen and then the credits start rolling at the end and they keep rolling and they keep rolling. That's the 6,500 people. And it's the essential workers, the people who do our testing every day, take our temperatures, clean our rooms, maintain these facilities. It's the bus drivers, it's the hotel workers. It's everyone who's been involved down here, and a huge thank you, to the people of Orange County, Florida, who've taken such good care of us over our time here. There are several thank yous, and I made a list. I'm sure I'm leaving some names off, but a few I wanted to be sure I focused on. First of all, from the Disney company, Bob Iger, who's now the executive chairman of Disney. This certainly would not have happened without him. I think when he and I first started discussing this in May, it seemed truly a pipe dream. Even this notion that there would be something called a bubble that we would play in, that there would be these protocols. I think he may have said to me, "Are you serious?" And I wasn't really initially. It wasn't my idea, and I resisted it, frankly. I said, it's just not realistic. And given the number of games we wanted to play, but somehow it came together. Bob Chapek, the CEO of Disney, was a huge supporter of this. Josh D'Amaro, who's chairman of all the parks. Jeff Valley, who's the president of this park of Disney World. A huge thank you to all of you. And Roz Durant, many of you know, she was formerly of ESPN where we first met, and then she got promoted into a senior vice president role at Disney, and she's been our day-to-day contact here, and she's made all this happen. I want to thank Alex Martins, who's the CEO of the Orlando Magic. He was one of the initial people, too, when there were some rumors in the media of other cities we were considering. He, of course, called me and said, "But you are focused on Orlando." And honestly, I wasn't initially. And so Alex, on behalf of his community, and has a strong relationship with the Disney folks, they wear the name on their uniforms. He was someone who pushed hard and knows this community well. And so thank you to Alex. From the Players Association, of course, Michelle Roberts, the executive director. She's been our partner in everything we've done down here. Chris Paul, the president of the Players Association. You know, I think from the night we shut down on March 11th, of course, the initial case, positive test was in Oklahoma City, you know, where they were playing that night against the Utah Jazz. So, you know, we begun talking that night and have been talking virtually daily ever since. There are two other players on their executive committee I'd also like to single out. That is Kyle Lowry, of course, the Toronto Raptors, and Dwight Powell from the Dallas Mavericks. Those three players, Chris, Kyle, and Dwight, had a weekly call with a group of us at the league office. And, you know, those were in that small group where we could have, you know, really honest, direct conversations with each other about understanding truly the needs of the players, of the teams, of the league. And I want to thank those three players in particular, together with their executive committee. From the NBA, my partner, colleague, Mark Tatum, our chief operating officer, deputy commissioner, who's here and spent much of the summer down on the campus here. Thank you personally, Mark. Byron Spruell, you know, our chief of basketball operations, who's you know, been down here the entire time as well. They've really made this happen from a league standpoint. A few others. The media here who are in Orlando know these folks well because of their day-to-day roles. Kelly Flato, who is head of our events. I mean, she's in essence the concierge of this community. You know, everything from making sure the buses run on time to those of you in this room who requested feather pillows. I know who you are. I've got the list. I know all the personal requests that everyone here has made. Flat water, bubbly water, I know it all. So Kelly has been remarkable. David Weiss, many may not know him, but he has taken on the role of sort of chief of medical protocol at the league office. And he's not a doctor, but he's in essence a scientist and has become one. And he's become an expert on everything about COVID-19, about the virus, about testing. And, you know, he, in essence, designed, you know, together with a panel of doctors, much of the protocol we're operating under. And just a few others real quickly. Dr. David Ho, he was someone, many of you may remember him, that when I got to the NBA in the early 90s, he was the lead HIV/AIDS researcher. And I think, you know, Magic Johnson has credited Dr. Ho with saving his life. And he was someone that I have maintained a personal relationship with over all of these years. And coincidentally, we ran into each other at a Brooklyn Nets game in January when people were beginning to hear about this coronavirus in China. And I was telling him what I was hearing from our offices in China. And again, this is what he does. So he now at Columbia University was already studying this virus in his lab. And then he, beginning at that point in January, became our lead scientist expert in helping us navigate through this virus. So, and a personal thank you to Dr. Ho, and just two more. Dr. John DiFiore, he's the chief of medical operations for the league, and Leroy Sims, many of you know as well, Dr. Sims. Those two doctors, league physicians who've really taken care of everyone on campus and have been truly remarkable in just their commitment to everyone's health and well-being. Lastly, of course, I want to congratulate the Miami Heat, the Los Angeles Lakers, to the Arison family, Pat Riley, Eric Spoelstra, just, fantastic what you've accomplished this season. And to the Lakers, Jeannie Buss, one of the Buss family, one of the longest standing family ownership groups in the league. And I should say Jeannie and Mickey Arison have both been sort of in the group of owners that I've been in regular touch with and, been sort of great advisors throughout this whole process. Rob Pelinka, the general manager, of course, Frank Vogel, done an incredible job coaching. And so here we are on the eve of Game 1. You all here have been here watching this basketball. It's been historic. I think not just because of the circumstances we're playing in, but the quality of the competition on the floor, the individual player performances, and I think that this is, now back to basketball, this hugely anticipated. We have a global audience. I'm really looking forward to it. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we'll start with our first question. On your far left, Tim Reynolds of the Associated Press.
Thanks for the bubbly water before I forget. You've referenced many times, and so has Michelle, that this was an extraordinary cooperative effort to get to tonight, to get to July 30th in the first place. Going forward, how would you identify some of the challenges that you guys are going to have to continue that spirit of cooperation in, and how soon do you think that process will begin as far as figuring out the revenue, figuring out all the dirty details that before you get into next season? Thank you.
Yeah, sure, Tim. The process has begun already. In fact, we identified, and this goes back, probably to July, when in talking to our teams, they actually said to the league office, you're all working so hard, we want to make sure that you're also focused on next season. And so within the league office, one of my colleagues, Amy Brooks, has been leading a separate team focused just on that, on what next season will look like, when the appropriate time is to start, what the protocol should be. I think we all know nothing has really changed in this virus, as far as I know. In fact, many states are beginning, I think the majority of states right now, cases are ticking back up again. There's predictions about combination flu and coronavirus season, what that will mean. People are moving back indoors. In some cases, people have COVID fatigue and, aren't following the same protocols. And so in many ways, we're looking at a lot of the same factors we looked at determining what to do this season. There is advancements clearly in the treatment of people once they get the disease. I'm hopeful that as we continue to study advancements in testing, that, for example, rapid testing could make a big difference in terms of our ability to potentially get fans in buildings. I think to identify quickly a player who is positive, sort of we're seeing that in the NFL right now. I mean, watching closely what's happening with that protocol. Can they play through it? How will that work? Will there be additional spread once they've identified a player that has it? So those are all the things we're looking at. And as you know, I mean, there's, in terms of Michelle and the players as our partners, because by definition, everything we're doing exists outside of the agreement in the current collective bargaining agreement. We need to negotiate everything. When training camp starts, when we start, how we're going to continue operating, potentially under reduced BRI, frankly. So those discussions are ongoing. My sense is, even though we've been at it with them for quite some time, given where we are, Game 1 of the finals, and that roughly 2 weeks from now we'll be done, I don't think those conversations are going to happen in sort of in as intense a fashion as they ultimately will need to, probably until we're finished down here. But I think we all understand the essential parameters. And in some of those conversations I mentioned earlier that I'm also having with individual players that we all are. I think everybody understands, just like in the country, there's public health considerations, but the economy is a public health issue as well, working and trying to strike that right balance. And so in this case, I think part of my job is to study what's happening in other industries, what other leagues are doing, including international soccer leagues. So all of that's on the table right now.
We'll go with Mark Spears from the Undefeated.
Yes, Adam. When the boycott happened, two questions. When the boycott happened, how did you find out about it, and how did you help get things back on course? The second thing, when you talk to owners, what were the biggest challenges and biggest triumphs in getting Black Lives Matter on the floor and getting all the social justice jerseys and everything from a social justice standpoint that we're seeing here?
Number one, I prefer not to refer to it as a boycott. I mean, to me, a boycott is when your employees or a group of people are seeking through economic leverage to change the conduct of somebody. I felt in this case, in our partnership with the players, I understood how, and after the fact, understood more about how it unfolded with the Milwaukee Bucks, but I never viewed this as necessarily aimed at the league. I think there was a larger message that the players wanted to make here. So, you know, I prefer to view it as a work stoppage. I found out about it as it was happening in real time. There, of course, had been rumors, many of you in this room had written earlier in the day that there was some contemplation. I was on the phone earlier in the day with Chris, who, of course, Chris Paul, who was here at the time. I was on the phone with Michelle, who was then and still is here. And I think it was the sense earlier in the day that the games were going to play on that night. And as we all now know, that there was a spontaneous aspect to it. Certainly people had thought about it. So I was at home, but colleagues who were here were in the arena. And again, as we all now know, certainly Orlando Magic did not know this was happening because they were on the floor warming up. But then I was called and told Milwaukee Bucks are not coming out of their locker room. And then I think for the next 2 days or so, it was pretty much around the clock talking to groups of players, groups of team executives who were here, groups of governors who weren't here. So, and we just were seeking to work through the issues. In terms of the social justice messages, Black Lives Matter on the court, the words that are on the jerseys, that was something that was initiated by the Players Association. Again, as I said earlier, there were really 3 factors, and one of them, in terms of how it was that we would restart, and social justice was one of them. And I'd say, to me, certainly it began with what's important to our players is important to us, but it wasn't just our players. I think, and the players know, and the NBA community knows, there's a long history in this league of fighting for social justice, for racial equality, and it seemed appropriate. And these were decisions that were made, quickly, in terms of standing up this restart. It was, again, I think there was some misunderstanding around some of the messages, sort of that there was a sense of censorship, that why aren't there these other messages? But these were messages that were proposed by the players through the Players Association and agreed to after some discussion with the league. And I've said since then that, I viewed this as extraordinary circumstances. And I understand, put aside the substance of the message, there are a lot of fans, especially given all that's going on in the world right now, who look to sports as a respite. And my response is that, again, I'm listening, and I understand that point of view too, but these are unique times. And I think that given the circumstances, I still firmly believe it was and is the right thing to do.
Right in front of me, Jeff Zillgitt with USA Today.
Adam, what does